Here's a question where the headline makes it sound worse than it is, but let's read this question. We haven't had a question from him in a while. This one was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Charlie in Starkville, Mississippi. Happy New Year, Charlie.
Happy New Year, Charlie. You and your no-account brother, too.
Now, I said the headline made it seem worse than it is. The headline was, Cody compares championship belts to Academy Awards. Cody Rhodes recently compared championship belts in wrestling to Academy Awards. Cody said, quote, "Don't be fooled. You talk to a lot of wrestlers. We love our belts. We really do. Most wrestlers who are worth their salt have their own display of all the belts they have ever won.
Oh, boy.
It's a significant thing. It's, no different than in Hollywood winning an Academy Award." Jim, what are your thoughts on Cody's comparison?
Well, and I do possess one set of belts, replica belts, and that's what he's talking about. He's not like all the guys still have their belts that they won, the actual belts, because goddamn either Dave Milliken or Dan Lambert have those all wrapped up.
I don't know about Dan Lambert or that other dirtbag, but if you're talking about guys in the last 15 years.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. I know for a fact because he told me that Bubba Ray and Devon Dudley had replica sets of every title belt that they'd ever won. They had to bring one of the sets of belts to TNA one time at a taping in Orlando for an angle of some kind. And they were bitching because they had them in glass display cases up on the wall and had to take them down and take the case open and whatever. And as I've mentioned, because I just loved these belts. I loved the design of them as a fan, not because we had them. They were just the nicest belts we ever had. The NWA World Tag Team belts that Crockett used through 1986. And then as soon as we lost them back to the Rock and Roll and they went to Manny Fernandez and Rick Rude, and then Manny and Rude took off and took the belts and they got new ones. I got a replica set of those because I just loved those belts. But having said that, in the old days, as I mentioned, you weren't allowed to keep the belts, and there were no replica makers. If you'd have wanted a belt that you held as a work in a territory, you would have had to have called Reggie Parks and spent a couple grand and waited 6 months or whatever to get that belt made. And Reggie Parks would have thought, "What? Are you a fucking idiot?" Because they didn't do that back then. But now that you can get the replica belts and they look better than the ones that, the promoters used to use, guys have taken to doing that. And I don't, as big a collector as I am and as big a historian, memorabilia collector as I am, I don't begrudge anybody doing that. But to make the statement that any wrestler worth his salt has replicas of all the belts that he's held, I think is a little bit of an exaggeration. And yeah, maybe, again, if you held the WWE title, you'd want to get one, put it on your wall, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But again, I think that shows where Cody's head is at. He's in his mind, he's an actor. He wants to be an actor. And that's the first thing that I would venture to guess that 30 or 40 years ago, if you'd asked a wrestler, he'd say, well, I compare it to, the Stanley Cup or the Lombardi Trophy or the fucking, as something in another sport. You would have compared it to that, not an Academy Award. Yes, I guess it's just the modern generation. But like I said, I've got 5 championship belts here, 3 of them the Smoky Mountain belts that I designed and paid for and ran the promotion, and 2 replicas of the old NWA World belts because I like the design, not even considering that we actually held them.
Plus, I'm pretty sure this is as close as Cody will ever get to actually getting an Academy Award, so let's not completely shit on this.
But yeah, again, how the business has changed. The boys have better looking belts now on their wall than the fucking promoters used to use on television in front of people.
Jim, our next question sent to...
And by that, let me say one more thing on that. Because just now that I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking about if I'd have said to the Rock and Roll Express or to the Midnight Express or Tully Blanchard, Arn Anderson, or any of the teams of that era at the time that we held them. Okay, guys, you've just held the NWA World Tag Title or the World Class Championship in Dallas or Mid-South Tag Team Title or United States Tag Team Title or whatever. Now for $2,000, you can buy replica copies of those belts that you've just held. Now that you've lost them in business, you can, for $2,000, well, that'd be $2,000 for each of you, because each of you'd want a set. You can't have one in your house, Ricky, and the other one in your house, Robert. They'd have looked at me like I had a steaming turd hanging out of my mouth. Because, and since then, I'm sure the Rock and Roll might have a set of belts laying around, probably if somebody gave them. But it wasn't, the belts weren't the important thing that you had. The important thing that you had was that if you had the belts, that means the booker and the promoter that you're working for thought that you were the top tag team for business. And if the heel had them, then you were the top heel team. And then when you drop them to a babyface team, they're the top babyface team. And that meant that you were going to be in main events and you were going to be paid more. That's why guys, most guys, some guys wanted the belt, and it was an old joke, especially babyfaces. You don't have to pay them. Just give them a six-pack, a rat, and the belt. They'll work for free. But most of the time, guys liked having the belts because it meant they were in the main events, they were going to make more money, and they didn't want to drop them in some cases because it meant that they would be moved out of that position. It wasn't the belt itself, and the idea that they were the champion is that they were being used in the absolute top spot, highest paying spot in that territory that they were going to be used in because they had them. So that's the difference now. And I mean, guys now are just, wow, we're going to win the belts. Even if it doesn't mean that they make any more money because they're on guaranteed contracts. So they probably don't. And even now we got to carry 40 pounds of fucking, extra equipment around in our bag, but we're not making any more money than we were for it. Rather than we're getting the World Tag Team title, we're going to get a good run. That means we're going to be in the main events all the way through the summer and the Great American Bashes and blah, blah, blah. We're going to be in a good position for this show. We're going to be the champions and we get the belts. Any more money? No. Any more bookings? No. Any more important? No. But we get the belts. That's where we're at now.
It's a weird question. But if, let's say, anytime between 70 and 84, there actually was a replica belt market back then. Or I should say replica belts on sale back then. Would there have been a big market? Would wrestling fans have wanted those? And would wrestling promoters have allowed them to be sold?
Good. Both good questions. The fans definitely would have wanted them. When the fans found out how much they cost, then that may very well have put an end to that. Because, I mean, let's face it. I know this is 40 and 50 years ago, but there was no souvenir in wrestling that cost $1,000 or $1,500. I don't know if there was a souvenir in any kind of professional sports besides maybe a ringside ticket at Muhammad Ali's biggest matches that would cost that much money. So the price tag in that era would have shut it. That's why I wasn't the only teenage kid that made my own championship belt out of aluminum foil and cardboard and a leather belt that you used to hold your pants up and blah, 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 because that was the only kind you could get. But everybody would have wanted one. Nobody wanted to pay that much for it. The promoters definitely would not have wanted the fans to have belts that were as nice or nicer than the ones that they were featuring on television. Because remember, depending on the territory and the individual promoter, a lot of those belts looked like shit. They were in a bag with sweaty gear every night. They were thrown around and people were hit over the head with them at the matches every day. And they used the same belt for years and years and years. And screws were missing and jewels fell out. I use jewels in quotation marks. And so, and the guys didn't take care of them for the most part, like I did, because we wanted our shit to look good. But unless guys were concerned about their overall ring appearance, they didn't take care of the belts because they weren't their property. And so the promoters probably would not have wanted the fans in the seats to have nicer looking belts than the ones that the wrestlers were wearing, since you brought it up.
Would the promoters have wanted the wrestlers to have a great way to hear music?
They certainly would have, because all those times that we used to sit in those concrete holding cells that served as locker rooms back in those days, it would have been great if we had something to listen to besides Donnie Bass getting out of breath and struggling to bend over and tie his boots. What were you talking about?
I was talking about the finest earbuds on the market today.
Well, funny, I was thinking the same thing. The Raycon wireless earbuds, the everydays. That's because you could wear them every day. Folks, a lot of people didn't even make New Year's resolutions this year. And you know what? That's okay, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't find a way to improve your quality of life and your existence, whether it's switching up your routines, going someplace new, or whether it's wearing a brand new pair of Raycon wireless earbuds, because that's the best way to bring audio with you, because they will not fall out of your ears. They fit well. You don't even need to use glue. That's one thing I've mentioned to a lot of people that have written in asking me about a good glue dissolver. You don't need to glue these things in. They fit on their own. Every once in a while, a piece of Scotch tape if you've got a cauliflower ear, but that's only for those of you who have been shooters in the past. Folks, the everyday earbuds from Raycon look, feel, and sound better than ever. And now we've made mention that you don't want to stick these in your ears and walk out in front of an oncoming train. Well, now there's an awareness mode for when you actually need to listen to your surroundings. So that way you can just pop that awareness mode on and you know that the train is almost upon you. Optimized gel tips for the perfect in-ear fit. They are comfortable, but, and I believe I've mentioned this, they will not fall out of your ears no matter what. You can stand and walk on your hands. You can pogo stick. You can get on one of those machines that has the dildo on the driving thing and it cranks up and boom, you can have all that done to you. They won't fall out of your head. And they offer 8 hours. You didn't give me any pushback on the dildo machine. They offer 8 hours of playtime and a 32-hour battery life. We might need to check on Brian and see if he's passed out. And the Raycon earbuds are priced just right. You get quality audio at half the price of the other premium audio brands. It's no wonder that the Raycon everyday earbuds have over 48,000 five-star reviews, and that's not even from Dave Meltzer. But right now, our listeners can get 15% off their Raycon order at buyraycon.com/JCE. That's BUYRAYCON.com/JCE. 15% off all of the Raycons. Buyraycon.com/JCE.
That is indeed correct, /JCE. And with that,
I'm glad to hear you're all right.
I'm all right. I'm going to let you have that dildo machine all to yourself.